Now imagine waking up one morning with a quiet but unsettling realization that the life you've been living may have never truly been yours. That every decision you've made, every belief you've carried, even the desires that seem to guide you forward, might not have originated from the deepest part of who you are, but were instead shaped by silent expectations, invisible patterns, and the subtle influence of the world around you. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, how much of who you are is real? And how much is simply a layer you've learned to wear in order to belong? How much of it is your own voice, and how much is an echo of your upbringing, your culture, or standards you never consciously chose? Have you ever felt like you're playing a role? Quietly moving through life as a character, in a script that was written long before you were aware of it, a role you don't remember agreeing to. You say what is expected, do what is appropriate, pursue what is considered right, while somewhere deep within, another part of you remains still watching, questioning. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is not that you're living a life that isn't fully yours, but that you've grown so accustomed to it, you no longer notice the difference. Today, we are not simply beginning a topic, we are stepping into an inner journey, where one of the most profound insights of Carl Jung begins to unfold life. In its truest sense, does not begin until you find yourself. But what does that really mean? Is finding yourself merely about understanding your personality, recognizing your emotions, or labeling who you think you are? Or is there something deeper beneath it, a quiet, transformative process where you don't just understand yourself, but slowly shed the layers that were never truly yours to begin with? Stay with me, because as we begin to uncover the invisible forces that subtly shape who you are, your beliefs, your behaviors, even the choices that feel deeply personal, you may start to see an uncomfortable truth. Most people go through life without ever truly encountering themselves. Not because they lack the desire, but because they were never shown the way. And in that realization, another possibility emerges, that you can step beyond those unconscious patterns and begin a life that is no longer driven by them but consciously chosen. The final realization we are about to encounter is not merely an idea, it is a turning point, a moment that can fundamentally shift the way you see yourself and how you exist in the world. Carl Jung was not just a psychologist, but a thinker who dared to move beyond the boundaries of his time, stepping into depths few are willing to face, where the unconscious is no longer an abstract concept, but a living force quietly shaping human life. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Jung did not believe that mental well-being was simply about adapting to society. He saw something else, a different path. To him, psychological growth was not about fitting in, but about awakening, not about becoming acceptable, but about becoming authentic. And this journey, he called individuation, the process of returning to oneself, of peeling away the layers that were placed upon you, to reach the original core beneath. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people never truly begin that journey. They remain confined within a version of themselves assembled from expectations, norms, and unseen influences. They follow paths that were laid out long before they questioned them, never pausing to ask, is this life truly mine? They seek validation from the outside world, believing that happiness comes from approval, recognition, and belonging. Yet deep within, there is always a quiet emptiness, a persistent, unshakable feeling that something essential within them has yet to be lived, yet to be discovered. Carl Jung once suggested that life truly begins the moment we stop running from ourselves. But before we can speak about finding who we are, we must confront a more uncomfortable truth. Most of us were never truly given the space to become ourselves in the first place. From the moment we enter the world, we are named, assigned roles, shaped by invisible expectations and unspoken standards. We quickly learn what is acceptable, what must be hidden, what earns approval, and what leads to rejection. What makes this even more profound is how quietly it all unfolds. We grow by adapting, by bending ourselves to fit. And over time, we learn to silence the parts of us that do not belong. Think back. Were there moments when you expressed yourself freely, only to be told to be different, to be more realistic, less sensitive, more controlled? And gradually, without even noticing, you began to hold yourself back, not because you changed, but because you learned to move away from who you truly are. Gradually, you are no longer just adapting. You begin to hide. The parts of you that once felt natural, alive, and free are pushed into silence, stored away in places no one can see. And in that process, something else is formed. A layer that Carl Jung called the persona, the mask you wear each day as you step into the world. It helps you belong, helps you navigate, helps you become acceptable. But the cost is subtle and profound. The more you identify with that mask, the further you drift from who you truly are. Yet that is only one side of the story. On the other side lies something deeper, the shadow. If the persona is what you choose to show, the shadow is everything you have learned to reject: your fears, your unspoken desires, your vulnerability, and even the strength you have never dared to claim. And here is the unsettling truth. The shadow does not disappear simply because you refuse to see it. It operates beneath the surface, shaping your thoughts, influencing your behavior, and coloring your emotional responses in ways you may not even notice. What you deny within yourself often reappears in others. You feel an intense dislike towards someone. You are triggered by seemingly small behaviors. But perhaps what disturbs you most is that you are witnessing a reflection of yourself. Jung understood something few are willing to face. The shadow is not your enemy. It is what is missing. Psychological growth does not come from eliminating it, but from having the courage to face it, accept it, and integrate it into who you are. And it is precisely there, in that honest confrontation, that a deeper kind of freedom begins to emerge. So the question is no longer whether you have a shadow. The question is, are you willing to see it? Most people move through life with a quiet certainty that they already know who they are. They define themselves through familiar labels: their name, their work, their past, their environment, and assume that this is the full extent of their identity. But according to Carl Jung, that is only the surface, a small fragment of a far deeper inner reality. Within each person exists a silent inner world where forgotten memories still echo, where suppressed emotions have not truly disappeared, where unspoken desires wait to be recognized. And perhaps most importantly, it is where your true potential remains hidden. Finding yourself is not about constructing a new identity, but about having the courage to dig deeper and uncover what has long been buried. Have you ever felt a subtle pull, as if a greater version of yourself is waiting to be fully lived? That is not imagination. It is the voice of your unconscious, quietly guiding you toward your authentic self. Jung called this process individuation, not becoming someone else, but becoming whole by embracing every part of who you are, including those you once avoided. Yet this is where most people stop. Because facing oneself is not easy, we avoid silence, filling our lives with distractions to escape being alone with our own thoughts. But what is suppressed does not disappear. It returns in the form of anxiety, self-sabotage, repeating patterns in relationships, and a lingering sense of being lost. The unconscious is always speaking. We have simply learned not to listen. When you begin to pay attention, you start to see patterns, old wounds shaping your choices, denied desires influencing your behavior. Take the fear of rejection. For example, many people spend their lives seeking approval, yet beneath it may lie a moment from the past when they felt unseen or unworthy. Jung believed that until you bring these hidden parts into the light, they will continue to control you from within. But the moment you face them, they lose their power. Imagine a life where you are no longer afraid of judgment, where you can speak your truth, and make decisions from within. That is the freedom of individuation. And the first step is not changing the world, but questioning yourself. Because the truth is, many people live as strangers to themselves. But you still have a choice. Next, we move into a deeper layer of the psyche that Carl Jung referred to as archetypes, ancient patterns embedded within the collective unconscious. These are not random images, but recurring psychological blueprints that have existed across generations. The hero, the guide, the antagonist, the innocent child, and importantly, they do not merely exist in myths or stories, they live within you, quietly shaping how you think, feel, and act. Among them, the hero represents the drive to grow, to overcome limitations, to become something greater. Yet this journey is never separate from the shadow, the darker aspect that must be faced. The greatest mistake is not having a shadow, but trying to eliminate it instead of understanding it as an essential part of growth. Jung also spoke of the anima and animus, the complementary forces within each individual. They represent the balance between intuition and logic, emotion and discipline. When one is rejected, wholeness is lost. When both are embraced, integration begins. And then we arrive at the deepest illusion of all, the illusion of the self. We tend to believe that we are fixed, unchanging identities. But in truth, the self is fluid, constantly evolving. You are not merely your name, your past, or your roles. You are a vast field of consciousness, your fears, your limitations. The stories you tell yourself are temporary constructions of the mind. The ego creates a sense of separation. It allows you to function, but also confines you within familiar patterns. And the moment you stop clinging to the idea of who you are, is the moment you begin to become something more. You are not fixed. You are evolving. The path that Carl Jung pointed toward is not a fixed formula, nor a destination that can be reached in a single moment. It is a process gradual, uncertain, yet deeply authentic. It begins the moment you choose to step into the unknown, rather than avoid it, for it is within that uncertainty, where ready-made answers no longer exist, that true transformation unfolds. It asks you to release the labels you have carried for so long, the definitions of who I am and who I should be. Not because they are entirely false, but because they are far too small for what you are capable of becoming. When you stop clinging to a fixed image of yourself, you create space for something far greater to emerge. It also invites you to listen not to the noise of the external world, but to the subtle movements within your dreams, your intuition, the feelings you cannot easily name. The unconscious is never silent. We have simply learned to ignore it. And above all, it is about surrendering to the process itself without control, without urgency, without the need to arrive. Because finding yourself is not an achievement, but an unfolding. And then, a simple yet profound truth reveals itself. You were never truly lost. You were only forgetting who you are. Now, the choice is yours. To remain within familiar limits, as a fraction of yourself, or to step into the vastness that has always been within you. Because life, in its truest sense, only begins when you find yourself